The Stylist. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. I am happy to talk to you today and interview the director of The Stylist, which is a horror film, best horror film I have seen this year. It's incredibly original. It's from a visionary director I can't wait to talk to and introduce you all to. Before we do that, I want to tell you about our event, Award This. You may have heard me talk about it. It is Film Threat's Indie Film Award Show. These are the movies that don't get love from the Oscars. They don't even get love from the Spirit Awards. These are the smaller indie movies that come out on video on demand, and there are a lot of great ones. Film Threat in 2020, last year, we reviewed 2,000 films. And of the 2,000 films, we whittled down a list of less than 100 we feel worthy of recognition across categories like indie comedy, indie horror. We have a category called WTF because these are indie movies that don't fit any category. We have pop culture documentary, socially relevant documentary. I'm excited for it because it's the only award show you can get a ticket for. So you can't get a ticket to the Oscars. Just try to get to the Spirit Awards. But Award This, you can get a ticket for. We have this drive-in event that we're doing in conjunction with the Frida Cinema, and that's on April 10th. And we're filming the awards. And then on April 18th, all of you can watch it. It's a virtual event at awardthis.com, which is where you can get tickets. I think it's better if John Bailey tells you more about it.
In a world where every award show is a fucking Zoom call, comes Award This. From your pals at Film Threat comes a celebration of true independent films. Join us on April 10th at a socially distanced drive-in. In fact, I'll be there as your announcer, wearing a hazmat suit and inside a giant Bacta tank. And prepare for a virtual award show unlike any other ever in the history of mankind, or awards kind. Award This 2021. It's happening, whether you like it or not. Drive-in live event on Saturday, April 10th. Virtual award show on Sunday, April 18th. Get tickets now at awardthis.com.
I hope you check it out. I also hope you check out this film called The Stylist. Let me tell you about this horror film. The opening scene of this film is hypnotic. It's absolutely hypnotic. And it's the type of horror film that I personally love. I'm not a big fan of gore, which is odd considering my last name, but I love horror that is psychological, that is original, that is a twist, and something we haven't seen before. And this film and this director, I'm so excited to talk to today. Jill Gevargizian. Oh my God, I had it perfect before.
You had it.
I had it. You got to tell
It's
me.
hard.
Because everyone needs to know this name now.
It's Jill Gevargizian.
Gevargizian.
I know it's hard. It's easy to say it the first time and then to repeat it again. There's too many things, too many syllables happening. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for doing this, because this film, I look, that opening scene is so hypnotic. It's a woman who is a hairstylist, and she is having a conversation, and it leads to a shocking moment. I watched that opening scene probably 5-6 times, and then I watched the film 3 times. I'm fascinated by this, what led to it. I learned later doing some research that there's a short film, and the short was developed into the feature. Tell me how this project came together, and just how it evolved from the short and into the feature.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey. This scares some people, and it's a funny topic, but I've been a professional hairstylist for now 17 plus years, and a filmmaker and a lover of horror. And it was probably 8 years ago that just the thought dawned on me: how is there not already a slasher about a hairstylist that kills people? That's where it first came from. And I started to kind of think of different ways to approach that idea. Like there's the, more traditional slasher where it would be like very over the top and kind of comedic. But I really have a dark love for anti-hero stories and kind of getting to know who's normally, the bad guy. And so when the idea first came, I had only made one short film. So it was the thought process that if we make a short first with the concept, get some more experience behind the camera, and then that would hopefully, help us as an asset when we were trying to make the feature to be able to, show the short film as a way to pitch the concept. And the short did excitingly well with festivals. So we had a lot of interest in a feature without really even mentioning that was our hope. And so we got to work on the script, and it's almost been 5 years in the making that we been writing versions of the script, struggling to try to get it financed at a lot of filmmakers, that game. But it was a year and a half ago that the core of us from the short film, I got together with them and I was like, basically, I'm done waiting, guys. I'm fed up with waiting for someone to come along and grant our wishes. We have to figure out how to do this on our own. So we started with a Kickstarter campaign for the project that went really well, and pieced together the rest of the funding as we went, and really brought back almost everyone from the short film. Plus we needed twice the crew and definitely 10 times the cast. But it was a labor of so much passion over 5 years from the short to this. It's been an ultimate dream come true to finally bring it to life.
Well, it's like Mark Duplass says, the cavalry isn't coming,
yes.
Right? You've got to use the resources. Now, I'm shocked to learn, but maybe now, I definitely there's an authenticity to the scenes in the hair salon, right? There's almost a fetishizing of the all the implements, the tools and whatnot. And I'm surprised also there's never been a horror film surrounding this world, because you are putting your trust in someone when you sit in that chair, because they have tools in their hands that can murder you in seconds.
Yes. That's kind of where the idea came, that how is there not already maybe something in the vein of Dr. Giggles that's kind of very over the top? There's all and maybe I was thinking in the torture porn genre, there's so many ways to torture or kill someone in the salon. That sounds horribly morbid, and I do not want to scare my clients. But yeah, that's where it started. And then we kind of went a mix of, I do love gore, but I also love the psychological side of stuff more. So we kind of try to fuse the two there.
Well, you did it so brilliantly, really leaned into the psychological aspect. And I can imagine with unruly customers that you may have thought about murdering them. Just some of them probably deserve it, or collecting their hair. Here's what struck me and blew my mind about this film is, one, the originality of it. Two, you have a woman director, which brings a really different. This is why I think that we need to have more women directors. Is give me a perspective I haven't seen. Show me and what works so well, and I feel like this is the markings of truly talented directors, is the tone. And that's where you knocked it out of the park for me, is that opening scene without even, and by the way, I put your movie on and did not know it was a horror film.
Oh my.
I get screeners. I thought oh, well, this is interesting, a casual conversation, and wasn't even aware well, who's the lead character in this, because you have the initial, the woman, and she's drinking wine and then confessing very personal part of her life to Claire, and then things go awry. But even when things go awry, you don't know exactly what's happening. So I really feel like I don't want to talk about any spoilers. So if you haven't seen the trailer or anything, just see the Stylist. But how did you get, what went into the work on that tone? And especially that opening scene. I feel opening scenes of movies are so important. That first 10 minutes is just, and you wait a really long time to even get to this incredible title sequence that feels like a retro, it feels like an Italian horror film in a way, with adding the copyright underneath the logo.
Yeah.
So please talk to me about that opening scene, the tone and how that worked.
It's exciting to hear from a perspective of someone who didn't see the short film, because the opening scene is a lot like the short. But it was always my intention for Claire to feel very human, as crazy as that may sound. I, in the writing process, really battled with the idea that I wanted her to feel very human, her emotions to feel very real and relatable and grounded, but acknowledging that like her actions were admittedly theatrical, and even very theatrical for the most infamous serial killer in real life. So it was, I think, us knowing that that was this line we wanted to ride, and so it was something we focused on the whole time, that this was something we were treating like a drama that happened to be a horror movie. So it was always focused that this was like a character piece about Claire, and Claire happens to be a serial killer, so it's going to also be a horror film. But I'm really interested in films like that there's an anti-hero where you're not excusing their inappropriate and criminal behavior, but you're giving a deeper understanding into who they are and maybe how this came to be. And I'm just really interested in characters like that leave you at the end where you're like, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this person, because it's not as simple as good or bad, even though of course what she's doing is horribly bad. Yeah.
Oh, that's the conflicting thing, is that Claire is likable. I mean, she's likable, and she's that's what I think is all. And also we're on her journey, right? And I also what really I love is the relationships that Claire has with the other female characters. There's the coffee barista, there's the character played by Brea Grant, and those things, I think that is what it strays so far from the horror film tropes, while also including those tropes, but twisted in a way that I just felt that's what really struck me, is those relationships she has. The coffee barista, they kind of have, I don't know if it's quite flirtatious, having seen it a few times, but she's interested in her life, and like, oh, you're regular, and she's, has concern for Claire, and the horrific moment, which I thought was so great, of the droplet on her boots, the way that was played. Can you tell me about creating those kind of moments, and then also Claire's relationships with the other characters in the film, which I thought was just played so well and so multi-dimensional. And we don't get to say that about a lot of horror films. A lot of horror films, it's like, well, here's the typical characters we always see. We can also predict who's going to die, right? Just based on the type of person, you flipped everything.
Thank you. Well, like you said, we wanted it to be, we always knew this was Claire's story. There's not nearly as many horror films told from the killer's point of view. Maniac is an obvious thing people bring up because he also scalped his victims, but it was always our intention for it to, we're taking you on Claire's journey, like you said. So with every choice we made, it was like, this should reflect how she feels, from the movement of the camera, the placement of it, the blocking of the scene, to like the music, like those slow motion moments you talked about, where it happens again with the blood drop on her shoe. We kind of created this rule in the film, and we called them Claire trances. And it was like, when she goes into these moments where she kind of forgets, like she like becomes laser focused on one thing, and maybe kind of forgets her surroundings. And so we created like a rule for that. Like, what does that mean? How do we treat the sound there? What visually happens? And so me and my DP, Robert Stern, way ahead of time, we really started to sit down and make these rules for the camera, and how it reflected how Claire felt. And it went all the way to the score, to how, we shouldn't be making music that makes the viewer feel scared of Claire. Instead, they should feel how she feels in the moment, which might be a different version of scary, you know. So it's weird because it's like we don't want you to be scared of Claire, but she is doing scary things. It was a battle with how do we approach that. It was just like laser focus on how does she feel here? How can we reflect that?
And what I found refreshing, and this is going to sound strange to say, is that the male characters are kind of sidelined.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. It's, you know, it's like, oh, like, can you talk about that a bit? I thought that was such a great choice. It really just, I thought just worked really well.
It's weird. It wasn't super intense. It wasn't intentional in the sense of when we set out to write it, we were like, this is going to be a movie only about women. It just naturally, I developed that Claire's world really wasn't really about men. And so I feel like they naturally they're like on the sides of everything in the perimeter of scenes. And how you kind of brought up her relationship with other characters and how we portrayed it, it connects to the men in the movie. We also try to make the camera almost go to an extreme place where it was maybe giving you the view of how Claire's feeling, and it's not maybe totally representing reality. Like really the biggest lead character would be Olivia's husband, Bria Grant's husband's character, Charlie, played by Davis DeRock, who has a very huge moment in the movie that was epically important, but it's not a huge role, and we don't even see, like, we intentionally don't show a conversation he and Olivia have at one point, but stay on Claire to kind of get her reaction to it instead of experiencing what it is. And those kind of decisions we made, and we were a little nervous about, like, it's very not normal to not show a conversation that's happening in the scene, like, at all. But we were like, but it makes sense here because we're taking you so deep into Claire's psyche that she's not even looking at it because she can't even handle it. It's just, yeah, we took that really far. And once seeing the film, once it was done, it really pointed out to me how we almost placed men in the corners of scenes, and it was not something I realized was happening. But it just naturally happened, and we were excited that it's a film about so many different types of women too. It's not just one stereotype.
But I like, yeah, I mean, it's almost like you pointed out that one scene where he's the husband to be is in the background and heard but not really seen or focused on. I thought that was a great choice. It almost reminds me of the way that adults are treated in the Peanuts cartoons.
Yes.
I mean that in a good way.
That's great. We got to recut it and add that sound over it for fun. We've got to do that.
Exactly. But also, this is not, you're not falling into, like, I've seen a lot of indie films that focus on, like, men are bad. This movie doesn't do that. This movie isn't about that. Like, it's not so simple and cut and dry. I just thought that was a great choice. I kind of want to get into spoilers, but I want to let people know that if we get into spoilers, that please don't listen or watch the rest of this, because I thought the ending was so powerful, and I feel like there could be more. I love the way you ended it, because it doesn't, it ends just perfectly. But I also feel that it could lead to, more with that character and what happens, the aftermath of that. Have you thought about that, or am I?
It's funny. It's a funny subject right now because, from this, like, inception or concept, when this idea came to us, and really, as far as making this film, like, within that universe that exists in my head, it's weird to describe, but, like, for me, the end of the movie is the end of this journey for Claire, but we don't show you that part. Like, it ends in a place where you can kind of guess what might happen next. But it, of course, does open it up to it not being over. And since the film's been done, And even while we were making it, we have plenty of jokes about a whole universe of films connected to the movie. But I have also seriously considered where could it go? Is this the end? Do I want to see Claire again? Claire's become so big a part of my life that it's weird to think that I'll never tell a story about her again.
Well, I could see that if something like this happened, you would have people on social media divided, as with all topics, right? There'd be people that would defend her, say she was in the right, and and there'd be people saying, people defending her, and then people saying she's horrible. And you could see how the authorities or the public might react, and how that would affect Claire, which would be the most interesting part. I'm glad that you're thinking that, because it would be interesting to see like where this would go. Let's talk about the gore, in the film, which is so well, all practical effects, at least from what I could tell. You never know with digital effects. A lot of digital effects these days are removal of things, right?
Yeah. Or we will, barely touch up something digitally that is
right,
like 98% practical.
But can you talk about the gore effects a little bit, and that, and then also the one thing that struck me, only because I saw it like so many times, and then I watched it with a friend, and he was saying, how is that, is that physically possible? Is that how a scalp?
Yeah.
Did you do research into this? I know. I'm just curious about the effects aspect and the gore effects and how that was achieved.
Yeah, it was a very fun thing to research and figure out. And if you can see, I have some scary scalps behind me that are from the film. The work was done by Colleen Kaufman and Philip Spruell, and they worked on the short film, and as well as a lot of my other shorts. We're so excited to finally approach a feature together, but it's a very intense effect to prepare and build, because so many steps need to happen for us to even start to work on it. Like in many instances, we wouldn't cast till way later down the process, but we obviously need, if someone says going to be scalped in a movie, we need to cast them. We need to know what their hair looks like, find a wig that will match that. And it's a very intricate effect when it actually comes down to putting it on an actor, because it's a bald cap with blood tubing underneath it, all these fake, all this like muscle tissue and blood in between, and then the wig that has skin on the front of it, which it was kind of an incredible combination of Colleen's talents. She's not only a special effects artist, she does beauty makeup, she does wig work, she works like on the ballet here in Kansas City. So she's done a lot of wig work in her life. So it's like, here's a combo of like the grossest thing you've ever done and a wig. It all needs to come together. But practical effects are terrifying from a production perspective, because when you go to shoot it, you don't know what's going to happen, and it might have happened great one time. That probably will never happen. Nothing happens twice like the same way. So it was quite a challenging thing, but I love gore and practical effects, especially in horror. I think, like I said, we did use a tiny bit of digital effects, VFX, to kind of help things, and then in areas that have nothing to do with gore, there are VFX. But it's such a fun process, and also, like I said, horrifying. The biggest days we have on the shoot, we'll spend a whole 12-hour day just shooting like a couple shots of it, something like a scalping coming off, which we did. I watched, like, I swear, every scalping that has happened in film, at least. I don't know if there's research of what it really happens. But in every other film, they're so fast. It's normally like a rip, but it's like happens in a second. And ours is like this slow, painful thing. So I don't know if there are any as slow as ours, but we watched tons of them.
That would make a great video on YouTube, a super cut of all the
scalpings.
But what also that struck me, especially having seen so many independent horror films, is you didn't go for the cheap scares. I don't think that there's a traditional jump scare in the movie. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it's there. And then even places where it would be a traditional scare, it's almost played out like a procedure and less like a horrific moment. And then your reaction is all your own, right? You're not manipulating. This is what I love. You're not manipulating the audience to feel exactly, this is exactly how I want you to feel. It's like, why don't you, I'm just going to present this and then you decide how to deal with it. Can you tell me about that and how you looked at other horror films and sort of went against type, so to speak, or what you would expect against expectations?
Yeah, we realized since we wanted it to be Claire's perspective, it didn't make sense to do certain things like jump scares because we're on her side unless something is scaring her, which that does happen, but not in the sense of, jumps. So there was actually a part in the film where, we really don't leave Claire's perspective, except for we are with Olivia a couple times. And kind of my defense for that is that it's portraying Olivia how Claire sees her, but we otherwise don't ever leave Claire and are just with a victim by themselves, kind of like waiting for something to happen like your typical slasher does. But we did have actually a moment we cut out of the film where we left Claire for a moment. We were just with this couple in an apartment and realized in hindsight, this is the only time we did that. And it didn't make sense because it turned it into a movie where we were suddenly on the opposite side of Claire. And so really it was all connected to that of, it doesn't make sense to have jump scares or to try to make people scared of her if we're trying to take you on her journey and like see things through her eyes.
I'm curious about the reaction people have had. Obviously, the short got a great reaction. But, as we're living in, the times of the pandemic, it's this sort of group experience of seeing a film at a theater. I've been going to the drive-in myself. I highly recommend, if there's a drive-in in your neighborhood, get to a drive-in. A lot of fun. And I can imagine that this movie would play so well at a drive-in. What has been people's reactions to the film? I'm really curious, and how horror fans see it. I mean, horror fans, it's just the horror community is one of the best. I go to a horror convention here in Pasadena every year, and it's just that horror community is so great. They're just so accepting.
Yeah,
I think they're going to love this movie, but I think that this is a horror film for non-horror fans, because as you put it in the beginning of our conversation, you said you approach it, this is a drama that has horror elements. So it's more of I love that you put it that way. That explains like why the tone is so unique. But what has been the reaction to the film? What are some of the things that have surprised you about how people have reacted?
it's been very exciting. Like you said, I definitely miss being able to go to all those, go to all the film festivals and be in a room and really hear, get to hear the reactions in real time to like specific moments. You learn like, did that moment, work the way you thought it would, or did people laugh to this certain thing? But thanks to the amazing world of social media, we've seen all the reactions to it. And like you said, the horror community is such a special community, which I feel like, once you go to a convention or a film festival and you discover that world, it's like becomes like this addicting, like you want to be part of it. But and then that's the thing for being able to make this film. Traveling around with the short, we were able to do our Kickstarter, and all those people, backed us before we even made the movie. So it was also like this extra pressure of everyone's helped us like literally finance the movie. I hope they love it after all this time. But the reaction has been incredible. One of the most surprising things I've seen, and we actually got to see it a couple times at a drive-in. In October, we played the Knoxville Horror Film Festival, and they held it at a drive-in, and we did it in Chicago as well. So I'm thankful that I'm in Kansas City where it gets cold as hell. So finally it's getting warm again. The drive-in will come back. But some of the surprising reactions have been which has been exciting, how personal people have, interpreted the film in ways that I didn't things that I didn't know that I put about of myself into the movie, or things that I had no idea could be interpreted that seem like that have been deeply personal to people, things about identity, and even some really incredible responses from the LGBT community, or interpretations of it that were fascinating to me and like incredibly flattering. That it was really our attempt to leave Claire's backstory open enough that people could interpret it their own way and connect to it. But it was really exciting to see the stuff that was relatable, of course, not wanting to kill or scalp people, but like the anxiety she feels, the loneliness, the issues with things with identity. It's really exciting to see that the personal side of it's connecting to people.
Well, I have to say, Jill, you terrified me. And I'm excited about your career. I feel that, you know, it's not often I'll see a new filmmaker and just say that person, that I want to watch everything that person does, and I got to follow that person's career. I'm just ecstatic at what you were able to do with, and also, you know, wasn't financed by a big studio Kickstarter. So, fantastic. I hope that
Thank you.
You have, so I'm assuming you have like something coming up, you're pitching something or something, because I just feel I want to see more of your voice out there. It's so unique.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm working on a few things spinning, hoping we can, you know, get one to take off. Still doing so much for the Stylist that I'm trying to make sure I'm focusing on all the stuff we're trying to get moving too.
Well, I really hope people discover it. It's just so such a unique vision, especially for horror. When, you know, with horror, people think, well, everything's been done. Nothing like this. And I'm just ecstatic that I had the opportunity to see it and talk to you today. Congratulations again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.